You're very welcome back. Now, when it comes to eating disorders, men are often more reluctant to talk about them, and Dubliner Keith Russell wants that to change.
Keith has lived with body dysmorphia and an eating disorder for over 20 years and hopes that sharing his own experiences will encourage others to seek help. Keith, thank you so much for joining us this morning, because it's not something that's easy to talk about. As we mentioned, men are quite quiet about this, but can you remember the time that you feel you developed an eating disorder?
Yeah, well, for me, it all started in my early teens, and I kind of noticed in my early teens I just wasn't very comfortable in my own skin.
Right.
And I remember kind of going for swimming lessons, and you would just start to kind of compare yourself to other people, and the more I compared myself to other people, kind of the more anxious I got, and the more I just kind of started to dislike myself. So the anxiety would kind of cause the body dysmorphia. And the body dysmorphia would cause the eating disorder, because for me, I would kind of tend to go towards binge eating disorder. So it's, you know, you'd feel so bad about yourself that you'd want to exercise, so you would try and not eat as much, and it would consume you all day, so you'd be constantly worried about what you're eating and what time you're eating. And then, because you're not allowing yourself certain foods, and you feel so bad about yourself, because I would go to the gym and I'd feel so anxious. I couldn't do anything in the gym.
Okay.
So I felt I was always caught in an endless spiral. So I would tend to just binge eat then the junk food, and then the guilt would start, and then the whole loop would start all over again.
Yeah, so you mentioned this started when you're a teenager, and I would imagine a lot of young boys and girls when they're teenagers aren't really comfortable in their own skin, particularly going to the likes of swimming pools and stuff.
Yeah.
So for you, what was different? Why did the anxiety kick on to a new level? You know, how could you not really escape it almost?
I think when it just consumes you so much, that's when the body dysmorphia really kicks in, because you're really concerned about what other people think of you and how other people perceive you. So,
and you just can't let go of it.
Exactly. So it's not necessarily even about your weight. It can be more about your body shape.
Yeah.
So, for example, I didn't like, say, my wrists. I didn't like my side profile of my face. I didn't like my hairline. I didn't like my calves. I didn't like. I would sit at home and I would go through on my fingers everything I didn't like about myself. And when you start telling yourself that so many times, you just start to believe it.
There's so many things when it comes to eating disorders that it's very gender-based. When you developed yours in the mid-90s, there would have been an awful lot of talk about eating disorders in young women, girls and women, but not so much about men. It's slowly but surely started. You were talking about Freddie Flintoff doing a documentary about his eating disorder.
Really struck home a lot of people.
Did you feel alone? Did you have people you could talk to?
No, I've never spoken about anything, because I suppose men have this kind of stigma where they feel, you know, they can't talk about certain topics, mental health in general, but these type of topics men very rarely speak about. And I suppose I was like so many other men. Well, I knew I had a problem, but I never spoke about it, and you kind of you don't want to admit to yourself that you have a problem, so you just sweep it under the rug, and you just get on with things.
You mentioned there it just became a spiral, an endless spiral, and that's what you've started off a podcast, and that's what it's called.
Yeah.
And you've been blown away with the feedback, the people messaging, and even actually, was it that podcast that got you to share your story, or you heard somebody else sharing their story and it kind of inspired you to do it?
No, I started off. I wrote a blog for myself, and then the blog turned into a website. And the website turned into a blogging website. So, because lots of other people were asking me, it was a great idea, can I share my story? And I said, well, send me your story and I'll pop it up on the website. So that turned into like a blogging website. And the blogging website turned into a podcast, because people were saying, God, I might not necessarily be comfortable writing my thoughts down, but some people are more comfortable doing the audio. So I just started doing the podcast, where I just wanted to give people a safe platform where they can share their stories. And it's just kind of took off.
Hospital admissions for eating disorders are up 66% in the last year here in Ireland. And an awful lot of people, I think it can be quite, you know, visual based. They'd look at you and go, you're perfectly healthy. What are you going on? You're not big. Do you get that? Do you get that people are like, you can't have an eating disorder? You look fine.
Yeah, I mean...
The understanding mightn't be there of what it is.
I think, especially with men, that's probably...
Is it?
I would say so. Like, a lot of guys who've contacted me through my website, through social media, they just want to remain anonymous.
Yeah.
So they don't want to, like, they've asked if they could write a story, but they don't want to put their name on it, say, for the website. So I think it's just like men feel they have to be maybe dominant or the breadwinner, or they have to be strong for everyone else, and
or that the outside pressures are different, because we've been focused on women for so long in fashion magazines, but the fact is we've always lived in a visual world with men as well, and with social media, the rise of, you know, these big buff sort of things for everyone. And
you see Love Island and all these programmes, of course. Can I ask you though, up 66% did you say, so what has been offered to people out there now, maybe from the government or from different organisations, to go and have a helpline or people to talk to as well as your podcast?
Well, the HSE have some really good information up on their website about eating disorders, about body dysmorphia, and there's a charity called Body Wise, have a brilliant information on their website.
Okay. BODYWYSE.
Yes, that's the word, yeah. But for even men in general, I'm not aware of any for just men in general, but they're the only two places that I actually know of. Yeah.
I know that if people are looking for you, your podcast is called The Endless Spiral. Where can they find your website?
So it's theendlessspiral.com.
Yeah.
And I'm on social media. I am Keith Russell at Instagram. And the podcast is everywhere. Like, it's on like 12 different platforms, so you can't miss the podcast. Just search for The Endless Spiral podcast.
Yeah, and I know it's difficult for you, you know, that you're wary of the angles that pictures are taken at, as you mentioned earlier on. So I know that this has probably been very hard, Keith.
Yeah, very hard.
But we really appreciate you coming in and talking to us about this.
And exactly, and you just know from the reaction that you're getting, speaking out, it's so important for men out there to don't be afraid, don't hide your head in the sand, and find somebody you're comfortable to talk to, even if it has to be anonymously as well.
Absolutely.
Keith, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
You're very welcome.